comfortably zoned with the Zigzag Man in Alameda, California, pushing on the doors of life marked pull and fighting the unholy trinity as we go. Big business, organized religion, and government. I am back, and you are comfortably zoned with me, the Zigzag Man, in Alameda, California, right across the bay from San Francisco, and where it's a little bit warmer. We're down by the lagoon at the 420 Studios. Everything in Alameda seems to be down by the lagoon, but there's a refreshing pugnancy about a lagoon that goes through the city. From my standpoint, a lot of people think, oh, it's horrible, it smells like hell, and I think it's wonderful because what it does, it covers up what could smell worse under the lagoon. So I think it's, if you think of it positively, it's doing us all a favor, and I don't know, I'm a little silly today. I'm having a good day because I'm getting to reunion, if you will, with an old comedy, but now she's not an old comedy buddy. It's a long time ago. She's young as ever. From way back in the Holy City Zoo, Punchline days in San Francisco in the 80s. Maria Falzone. Maria, how are you?
Hey, Ralph, how you doing?
It's nice. We talked.
I don't know if you knew this, but when I moved to the Bay Area, I moved to Alameda. That was the first place I lived. I lived on Alameda Ave. Yep.
Wow.
In this gorgeous Victorian, and my rent was $198 a month.
You know what the rent would be for that Victorian today, and I'm not kidding you. That would be like $2,400. Did you rent the whole thing, or was it like just?
No, I rented a room. But each one of us paid that. We probably paid. It was probably $600 for the second floor, and there was a big living room, and we each had a bedroom and a really nice kitchen.
Yeah, well,
and I had a deck off.
I raised my kid here, and basically been in Alameda for 24 years in Alameda. So. What a coincidence. Is it not a great place to live?
It's beautiful. It was really great. But being a comedian and not having a car at the time, it wasn't the best place to want to do stand-up comedy without a car.
Right.
But I loved it. It was a great place to move to. I ate mushrooms, and a voice told me to move to San Francisco.
Well, I remember what drew me to San Francisco, of course, was the Asian midgets, but that's another story. That was a long time ago. People change, for Christ's sake. They're little people now, and I know it, and I've developed a little political correctness.
Oh, have you? Not too much, not to the point where you're stifled.
No, it won't happen totally, thank God. But I do have a certain respect, and I've grown up, and I think, no, I haven't. I'm only kidding you, Marie. You knew that would never happen, so not to worry. I have so much to talk to you about, but I don't want to get lost in the fact that the podcast radio is basically people come on to tote what they have going to, let me know. How we can spread the word of Maria, what you got, what you're doing. I know you're into some interesting work that we talked about off the air. And before we get to reminisce about the old Holy City Zoo days, talk about Maria presently so that doesn't get lost.
Oh, okay. So, after doing stand-up for God knows how many years, oh, God, that's been over 30 years, right? Over 30 years ago. And then, I did the whole LA thing, and I did the, New York thing. And I ended up doing a lecture, and I'm still lecturing. This is actually my 20th year of lecturing at universities on safer sex. And so the name of my show is Sex Rules. And I have a website, sexrules.org. And I started a not-for-profit foundation called IFCSHE, or International Foundation for Comprehensive Sexual Health and Education, because after fucking talking to kids for 20 years and all the shit that people don't tell them and all the pain and all the suffering and all the shame, I just thought, enough. We have to go ahead and start, shedding light on sex and really push for comprehensive sex education. So I'm a safer sex.
How does the government hold back on getting this information out? Because I know from having lived in San Francisco in the 80s and seen how the AIDS epidemic was covered up so much, I know somehow, some way, I've got a feeling that you're up against the powers that be in the government.
Well, you know what? I'm not, because I don't deal with it at that level. I'm at university levels. I'm at the university level, and nobody's stopping anything, at a college level. They're about, and we'll just take a look at it from a financial point of view, right? If I have a student come to my campus and my student is sexually assaulted, the chances of my getting 4 years of them at my school diminishes, right? Then I get a reputation of sexual assault. If I have a student that contracts an STI while on campus, or has an experience that's not favorable for them, it's not favorable for the university. And everybody who gets paid on a university gets paid to take care of kids. So I don't come up against that government shit. And
that's good.
Yeah,
that
there's none of that happening. Everybody's on board. Everybody's like, kumbaya, let's hold hands and let's do it.
Okay.
And I think that, and I don't think that politicians are primarily against it. I just think politicians don't have a backbone. It's what they think their constituency wants.
Well, their constituency is made up of churchgoers, and
sometimes not. That's not the case in San Francisco. But listen, I'm going to say something. I performed in Amsterdam. Now, people are open sexually in Amsterdam, right? Prostitution is legal in Amsterdam, within Amsterdam. Not all of the Netherlands, right? You have conservative areas there. And when I was on stage, I said, when I'm not doing stand-up, I go to universities and lecture on sex and safer sex, and they snorted every night. And I go, what the fuck is that about? And they go, you Americans need that. And I go, oh, really? So how many people here, your parents talk to you about sex? Not everybody raised their hands in this very sexually open, liberated area, right, this open, liberated city. And I said, how many? And then if they did, I said, who talked to you? And men always said that their fathers talked to them, and women said that their mothers talked to them. And when they talked to them about intercourse. They never talked about masturbation. They never talked about oral sex. They never talked about anal sex. They never talked about transgender sex. The only thing that they focused on was a penis and a vagina. And my response to them is, you're just as closed-minded as we are when it comes to sex, and just as ignorant as our society is, because that's one aspect of sex. And just because you legalize something doesn't always make it, like, the shame of it go away. It just means it's legal. Right. And it's one step towards it. But we're talking about systematically, people are afraid of their sexuality, and they're ashamed of their sexuality. There's always something that we have to overcome when it comes to sex.
Now, as an educator, give me a story of someone whose life you might have transformed and really saved from a horrible existence. Because if you're not at ease with your sexuality,
all right, I'll tell you.
It's not going to be a good life.
Yeah,
tell me a great
I'll tell you
story.
two, if I may. One by a guy, one by a woman. Girl comes up to me, and I actually, I talk about when you're younger and you're negotiating sex and figuring it out, you really have to have a strong sense of no and what your boundaries are and being able to say no. When you get older, it's about saying yes, because everything else gets in the fucking way of having sex. You got to fold the sheets.
Right.
So And what I said in the show was, if you've been sexually molested, your no was taken away from you, and it was taken away from you systematically. And you think that you wanted to have sex, because sex needs to be equal. Someone is 20 years older than you, 15 years older than you when you're young. That's not equal. And so this girl came up to me, and she started crying. She goes, I think I was sexually molested. She goes, I know I was. She goes, for the longest time, I was thinking that, we loved each other, but it never felt right. And after you said that, I can say that I was sexually molested by my youth minister. And she's crying. And I said, listen, you got to go into counseling. She goes, I don't want to have to tell my mother. I go, you don't have to tell your mother. She goes, I don't want to have to confront him. I go, you don't have to confront him. I go, it's not about you. It's so you can get to a powerful no, and you can feel good about yourself, and so you can be free of all this shame and all of this pain. And she's sobbing. I go, well, you promise me you'll go to the counselor and get into counseling. And she says, okay. And I don't hear from her. And 6 months or 7 months later, I'm about to walk on stage because I'm doing the freshman orientation. And she comes up next to me, and her hair is all these wild colors. And she looks at me. She goes, do you remember me? I go, yeah, I do. I think of you often. How are you? And she says, I am doing great. She goes, I went to a counselor. She said, and I told my mother, and we pressed charges, and he's in prison for 15 years, and he can't do it to anybody else, and I am free. She goes, I am so free, and I am so happy.
That is so nice. Wow.
Yeah. And I'm crying as I'm about to walk on stage, right? Because I'm like, wow, okay.
Yeah, and, wow.
So then I have a guy.
The other one. That was so nice. Tell me the other one.
Okay. He comes up to me after a presentation, and he's like, I'm in a relationship with a girl who doesn't like to have sex. I'm like, oh, that's a problem. He goes, yeah, she had some stuff happen to her. And I'm like, oh, yeah, that happens. And I said, is she working on it? He says, no, not really. And I said, and do you feel like you're wrong for wanting to have sex and her not wanting to have sex? And he said, yeah, I do. And I said to him, well, you don't have to stay in that relationship. I says, because somehow you think you're an asshole for wanting sex and not wanting to be in that relationship. And you're going to show her that you're a nice guy. And you're going to sacrifice your own self and your own sexual desire to prove to one person that you're a nice guy and you're not like all men. And you wanting sex doesn't make you like all men. It makes you someone who wants sex and enjoys sex and wants to be with someone who likes sex and enjoys sex. And you do not have to make up for the sins of all asshole men. I go, was your dad an asshole? And he starts to cry, and he goes, yeah, my dad was an asshole. I go, you're not your dad. And you don't have to do that.
Yeah, you don't have to hang on any cross for anybody else's sin.
Yeah, and you're not responsible for other people's, issues or other people's problems. And that's not to say, like you don't have to stay, especially when you're 21 years, or you're 19 years old. You're fucking 19.
So I hope he pulled it off. I hope he was able
He did.
to.
He did.
Oh,
he
good.
Did.
Because
because we stay because of guilt. We stay because of shame. We stay all that shit that's there. There's so much stuff around it.
And it doesn't all have to be dealt with every day. You can just move on in a lot of ways, and it's
What
wonderful.
do you mean by that statement? I don't know what you mean.
No, what I'm saying is that you don't have to, as someone, you can move on by getting counseling and being talked to.
Yeah.
And
the first step
it doesn't have to stay that way the rest of your life.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Walk through the fire, because really, walk through the fire, get singed and rise from the ashes like a powerful phoenix, because the only way out is through, not around. It's just through. You got to go through it. And just all of it. I'm transgender. I'm queer. I like to be spanked. Whatever it is, like, students just feel free to come up and say what it is that they say, and then it's like, always do it so that you honor yourself and you do it safely, and that you feel good about it. You feel good about the choice, because you may not feel good, not everyone orgasms, but you feel good about what you did, and it was fun.
Yeah. You know what I noticed, Maria? You refer to it when you're going to give a lecture in a college. You refer to it as on stage. You don't say, I'm going to the podium. And
Well, there's no podium. I'm not in front of a podium.
Okay. But you think of it as on stage. Most professors, I'm sure, and I know for a fact, do not think of it as a stage. They think of
they're professors, right? I'm not.
So.
I don't even have a degree. I always say that. Like, I'm a comedian. I don't have a degree in sex. I didn't know you could get a degree in sex because I would have changed my major. Like pulling an all-nighter would have been part of the coursework. I would have asked for extra credit. I mean, I would have been a good student if I was studying sex. And, there would have been pressure to perform.
Yeah.
So I'm not I'm an educator, but I don't have a degree in it. I think the thing is that I just bring humor and a lightness to it. And coming from the world of stand-up comedy, I mean, you cannot pussyfoot around shit and be funny. Comedy's direct.
Right.
It's direct. I always say that comedy is to theater what poetry is to prose. You've got to be short, concise, and just straight.
Yes, a 3-beat thing. The opener.
Yeah, and it's a punchline. It's not a tickle. It's a punchline.
Right. And more than that, it's a punch word if you want to really break it down. But yeah,
absolutely.
But and the surprise every now and again you have to present it different pace and take it off and once it's in you,
oh my God, it's so magical. It is so magical. And so then I do a stage show where it's called Sex, Stand Up, and Silliness. And so I do a little bit of stand up because the lecture it's funny, but it's more of a lecture, right, with a lot of really good jokes. But then it's stand up, and then people text me their questions about sex. And then I'll answer them, and the next thing you know, the texting stops, and people just start having a conversation. And it's not scripted. I don't know how it's going to go because I don't know what the questions are. I don't know what people are going to share. And it becomes the most amazing experience. It's incredible.
We didn't have cell phones in those days. That is an amazing thing you're doing. Did you ever hear of anybody doing this, or is this your idea? I've never heard of anybody on stage saying, text me your questions.
Well, I just did it at the show because I'm like, well, how do I get this, And I did it, and it just worked so beautifully that I just started doing it. But literally what happens is the cell phones go away and people just start chatting. They just start sharing. So there's like a space because I really don't have any judgment. You're pretty clear about what the rules are. So now we're going to play, and people are up to playing.
Wow. Nice. What a long way from back in the Holy City Zoo days.
Yeah.
The Punchline days in San Francisco.
Did you ever do a paid show there?
Yes, I did.
I never did. I only did the open mic.
They paid me to be a host. You get to host the open micers, and they paid me $50 once. I got on the program. Everything is $50.
I know. Is it still $50?
Unless you get to a gig in bumfuck Modesto, right? And it's 8:00 at night, and you drove an hour and a half to get there, and they say, we can't pay you $50. We'll pay you $35 because.
Oh Jesus!
Am I right?
Oh my God! Oh.
Stuff like that. Anyway, it has its advantages. I'll tell you what. Once you can stand up on stage, there's nothing to be afraid of in the world, and it leads to just a completion of oneself, because you could put it out as an act, but I don't know of very many people who aren't in some way their quote acts. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Well, I don't know, but when you say that, who I think of? I think of Steve, the one-liner guy from Boston, Steve Wright.
Steve Wright is yes. He's a thought. There are some people, some geniuses. I still think Carlin is an absolute genius. He transcends comedy. He's a genius, and
I agree.
was, rest his soul. Stephen Wright is incredibly clever. Just his juxtaposition on things is wonderful. Bill Hicks was terrific. We lose sight of it. Cosby was Cosby in his day. Sick Pud that he turned out to be. He could put that, and Newhart, and we just grew up with some and of course Carl Reiner and the 3,000-Year-Old Man with Mel Brooks. We had some great stuff to listen to form our comic sense of ourselves.
Right, but I have to say that I like where comedy and humor has gone now, with Kristen Wiig and for my daughter to see women that are that are out there and changing the conversation and doing humor in a very different way. Liz, what's her name? The one who has the Unbreakable Kimmy Schmidt, which I think is so hilarious.
Yeah. Joan Rivers can't. Do you talk to your daughter about Joan Rivers?
No.
Okay. Was she not a favorite of yours? No.
No.
Okay.
No, because I just didn't. It's very interesting. She had me watch something yesterday. Oh my God, what was his name? And he wrote for Saturday Night Live. Mulaney. Matt Mulaney, John Mulaney. And, she's like, well, do you want to watch this? And I just, when I sat there and I laughed laughed out loud maybe 3 times. And I said, it's not funny to me. That formula doesn't work for me anymore.
Right. Well, you've progressed, but go back to your first night at the Holy City Zoo, first time you got on stage at the zoo.
Yeah, it was at 3 in the morning or 2 in the morning.
New people got on.
All right, so here's the thing. I ate mushrooms. The voice told me to move to San Francisco. I moved to San Francisco. I think it took me a year and a half of living in San Francisco before I actually went and did an open mic. And I had worked all day, and I was, I went to a friend's house and had dinner, and they came with me. And if they hadn't stayed, they would have been the only people in the audience, and I was a nervous wreck. And I talked to other comedians, but I really didn't talk to anybody else. And I got up and did my show and went, oh, my God, what the hell did I get myself into? This is hard.
Right. It looks so easy. Right. Do not try this at home, ladies and gentlemen.
Yeah, and Boston was a very different scene than there,
Did well? Did you think you did well in your own head?
You know what? I obviously I had to have thought I did well because I wouldn't have gone back. I mean, I think when I look back and I think about that, there had to be a level of delusion. You know what I mean?
Early on.
One little giggle. It's like, oh my God, I got it. I can do this.
Who did you befriend early on as a fellow comedian? Or who were some of the people you befriended early on that started about the time you did?
Well, I hung out with them. A lot of them don't do comedy anymore. I think a lot. Matt Weinhold. Matt Weinhold was the big comedian of the time of us open micers. And I don't even know does Matt do comedy still?
I don't know.
And he's so funny. He had the whole Captain Kirk bit. Erin O'Connor. She doesn't do stand-up anymore. We're friends on Facebook. She's married to Bob Zaney, who does comedy and produces shows. John Boggs doesn't do comedy anymore. I'm trying to think who else. Most of the people, Greg Carey doesn't do comedy anymore. We were roommates, and we were roommates in Boston and New York together.
Really?
Most of the people that I did stand-up with, that I started out with, don't do stand-up anymore.
Okay. So you feel like
you're
a survivor, last surviving comic. I got, when Diane and I got together, you remember Diane Satin, the mistress of Deadpan, and we had Philip, and about 2 years, Philip was about 2, and she became ill, and she had a heart attack and recovered, and I became the stay-at-home dad, and we split after he was about 6, and I was still the stay-at-home dad. Because rents had become so outrageous in the Bay Area that I went and got a camper van and then a series of camper vans, and basically lived rent-free, but not free at all, to stay close. And so I stopped doing comedy for a long time, and about 6 or 7 years ago, I ran. Do you remember Shama?
I do.
Okay.
I do remember
Shama. Do you remember Shama's dad?
No, I never met her dad.
Well, her dad was a comedian as well, and instrumental in the early years of the San Francisco comedy competition and stuff like that. So, but I'm sitting in the sun with the door to my motor home, which I parked across the street from the Park Street Bridge in Alameda into Oakland. You can't park a motor home in Alameda. I'm sitting in the sun, the door's open, guy walks by, he says, "I know you from somewhere." I said, "Well, do you have a warrant?" That's the only thing I could think of. He says, no, you did comedy. I go, "Wow." And it's Wally Hogue. And Wally Shama's dad, and this is like 20 years after I did comedy, and he says, "You got to miss it." And we went out to breakfast, and we talked, and I said, "Wow, I do miss it." And I started. I went to a venue, and I stood on stage once or twice, and I got the bug. Somebody told me, because I'm such a sports nut, and I know I'm not funny enough to ever do, take it anywhere with the comedy, but somebody told me about podcasting, and I thought, well, why don't I do a sports, throw in a little comedy, do a little podcast, and I started doing podcast, and I get everything I need, all the stage time, if you will, out of podcasting, everything there is. And about 6 or 8 months ago, I ran into a situation where I was able to start a podcast network of different shows that I find to be intriguing. Most of them are sports, but I have a variety of shows that cover other topics as well. And I got a website, and I made my Comfortably Zoned podcast into a Comfortably Zoned radio network, and I'm instrumental in most of the shows that go on in one way or the other. If I don't help out technically, I guest host, or I produce in some way, or I keep my hand in most of the shows. And so I'm doing what I swore I would avoid for the rest of my life in my retirement years, and that was work, because I've been work adverse since I was 14 years old, and I found out that work didn't mean play. And, that was a big shock. So, and now you know the rest of the story.
Yeah. Does Shama still do comedy?
Pardon me? Oh, Shama
still
does. No, she doesn't. But she's a Facebook friend, and she's basically in the past few years, highly bright, technical woman. Has a lot of things going. Wally has been slowing down a little bit. Let's put it that way, and she takes care of him, and she's taking him through the journey, as it were, and she spends a lot of time doing that. She's been a guest on the show. She's a delight. She's been a guest a few times. She's a delightful woman. And,
she's awesome. She's awesome.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, that's the best way to describe it. Wally says, you don't remember me, but I'm Shama's dad. And I just went up to him and gave him a hug, for having her. That kind of thing. Tremendous guy, and Shama. So he was basically instrumental he got my fire going, because basically I majored in recreation in life. There you go. So what you got next? What you got coming up next?
Well, I'm just going to be doing a couple of colleges, and then I'm working on figuring out. After talking to you, I don't know if I want to do a podcast or if I want to do a YouTube web series. I have to figure that out.
You know what I did for a little while after starting with FCC Free Radio in San Francisco, and I had several run-ins with the management, and I decided to do my own podcasts, but I wanted to do something a little special, so I would put a slideshow to my podcasts and put it up on YouTube. So I'd record the interview as you and I are doing, but I would get a whole bunch of pictures depending on the subject, the interviewee, sports figures, depending on what we're talking about, and I'd run a slideshow in conjunction with the MP3 tape that I made. And that you might enjoy that, because there's two artistic senses being used. There's putting together the photography and getting the pictures and all the fun of Googling the stuff and the research. And so that's something you might consider. But there's no set. See, the one thing. Okay, well.
Because I'm more, that whole editing stuff and putting shit together part doesn't interest me. That doesn't interest me. I just want to say what I got to say and be done with it.
Well, then I'll put you on my podcast network, and you'll have a show, and you can do it any way you want. You could team with anyone you want to team with, or you could do it alone. You could do it as a commentary. You can do it on any subject or subjects you want. The world is your oyster at Comfortably Zoned Radio Network, young lady.
Yeah, I'm going to have to figure it out. Because I think, yeah. And I want to do it also like with an audience. Do you remember, and what happened to him? The dude who had the radio show in the morning who was a miserable prick.
Oh, yeah. That miserable prick had a producer that I can't think of his name right now. He had a producer that still runs the FCC Free Radio Network, and he outdoes the comic we're thinking about, and it still slips my mind.
No, it's not. It's Alex Bennett. Alex Bennett had the show.
Yeah. Well, Alex Bennett, producer, was John Miller at one time. So, and I like to think that whatever people think badly about Alex Bennett, call FCC Free Radio. Get in touch with John Miller. Spend some time with him. You'll think, back and you go, Alex Bennett was a great guy. It's all relative.
Oh, really?
Alles is relative, Marie. And I don't say bad things about people after they die. I like to say bad things about them while they're still alive.
Oh, did he die?
So, no, he didn't. He's still alive. Well, Alex Bennett, I'm sure Alex Bennett is, last I heard, I think he was on Sirius Radio, or he had something going that kept him in the biz. The other guy is still alive and still at FCC-free radio. So everybody mourns in their own manner over that. It's been a delight, my darling.
Yeah, it was.
I really enjoyed it. Will you come back?
Good. Let me know when it airs so that way I can go ahead and put it on my
absolutely.
I'll
send
page.
you a link. And, this was fun for me. I'm going to end the episode the way I do everybody, so I want you to listen to this. I implore everybody out there to keep your dreams wet, keep your humor dry, keep your kids and your grandkids out of military recruiting offices and off the laps of clerics that wear dresses. And you'll be surprised. If you put all that together, it'll be better for you. Some way. You don't have to do it, but some do, some don't. What do you think of that?
Awesome.
Good advice?
Good advice.
All right. You'll come back, and I'll keep in touch about your podcast opportunity in the future, young lady.
Yeah, please.
It's free. You get to keep all the advertising, and I help you do it. So as opposed to the other guy where it's $80 a month, you think you're on the radio, and they phony up stats. So.
Was that the one? But that's. But when I was on your site, I use speakers.com.
I use Speaker to put up the show, but my website. I'll send you a link to the website itself, but once the show goes up, it's archived on YouTube.
Okay, so you don't have to go to Speakers because that's where you're at, though, right?
Yeah, no. I'll send you the thing. Where I'm at is if you will go to Comfortably Zoned Radio.
I was there.
And if you go to all the individual shows, they have links to all the different shows, and they have show descriptions. And,
I saw that you had Kurt.
Kurt, did you know? I was just going to say, Kurt started out to do a podcast. Listen to his podcast on there. He has some film work that he's doing. He has this terrific film about San Francisco history coming out, and Margaret Cho is in it, and all these good things. Robin B. something. You can check that out too. So yeah, so Kurt does it. I don't know if you remember Freddie Lazarus from the Zoo days. He was kind of a manager, door person after Lance.
I remember Lance.
Perhaps not. In any event, we'll catch you down the road, hon.
Good. Yeah, please.
All right. I'll send you a link, and everybody out there, keep on keeping on. Do all those things I told you to do. See you.
Okay. Bye.
Bye. I am back, and you are comfortably zoned with the Zigzag Man in Alameda, California, right across the bay from San Francisco in the northern part of the state. And I'm doing my thing on a Friday morning, blessed to have as a guest an old buddy from the Holy City Zoo comedy days in San Francisco back in the 80s, originally from Boston, now living in L.A., Mr. Ed Crasnick. How are you, sir?
I'm awake, which is amazing.
Isn't it? Before 12. I think when we communicated off the air, I had to confirm what time we were. You said, "Well, the best time for me is Friday at 9:30," and I said, "A.M. or the surprise?"
I'm not sure that I'm not sure what year it is, but I do know that we're talking, and it's great to talk to you. And I certainly remember you from the Holy City Zoo days, but also the fact that you live in Alameda is fantastic. I think that's one of the coolest places around. Not that the Bay Area isn't cool too. I used to live in North Beach for many years, but Alameda is a very unique little town and should be the center of the universe.
It really should. It's an island off of Oakland, a man-made estuary, and it's a godsend. There are like 12 parks, wonderful schools. I raised my kid, co-raised my kid with Diane Satin. I don't know if you remember her from the old.
I do remember her. Yeah.
Days.
Yeah.
Yeah. She sadly passed away earlier in the year after battling lupus for many years.
Oh, I'm so sorry. Wow.
Yeah, and she's remembered, good mom, and we were. Gave me the opportunity to be the stay-at-home dad for the first 5 years of my son's existence.
That's great.
And that was a great experience, and yeah, so pretty cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, what is life like in Alameda? What is the daily life like up out there? Because there's great cafes, there's great theater, there's great movies, there's some history there, and it's just a very unique little town.
Really is super, and I'll tell you how I came to it. My uncle was the first merchant marine captain to be 26 years old, or the youngest merchant marine captain in history, 26-year-old kid, and he took his training at Kings Point, New York. They had a merchant marine academy, and they sent him to, of all places, Alameda, California. This is before the war, right before the war, for his final training. And I get to walk by the building that is still there that these guys took their training in, my uncle included. And in the Alameda Museum, there is a ship's wheel from the training ship of the Merchant Marines. So I go in there every now and again, and I put my hand on it. And
that's pretty good, and that's I'm sure the Spirit steers you in the right direction.
Absolutely. He told me about Alameda years ago, and I didn't come to it. I'd been living out here for almost 20 years before I came to it.
Great place. Yeah. I was so impressed by it. I would love to live there myself, but I don't.
You'd be amazed at what the rent the rents are, and the average cost for a home. It's just like the rest of the Bay Area. It's absolutely crazy.
Yeah, I'm sure of it. I remember it from some years ago, and I was like saying, wow, this would be a great community to live in. It's near water, and it's sort of its own thing, but there's this history to it, and it also seemed like real people actually live there, which is
right.
When I say real people, I'm talking about like human beings. And
well, right now,
it's
funny you mention that. We have a real renters issue. There's Alameda's Renters Coalition that is trying to bring in some rent control, and they finally got it on the ballot, and it's going to be a complicated vote. You have to vote against one thing and for another thing, but they're going to get some rent stabilization, which has caused the problem of incredible landlord gouging of the rental situation. It's caused a lot of old folks who have been here for many, many years to have to move. the rents are going up, and it's terrible. So we're finally getting some relief from that. As I say, we're surrounded by water. We have the old Navy base, which has been turned over to the city, and it's now Alameda Point. And there's much plans for construction and housing and this, that, and the other thing. Big problem, the big elephant in the room is traffic and congestion and ways to get on and off the island. And so, like any other little city, it's grown into almost a municipality, but it retains its flavor.
That's true.
Small townness, if you will. And hey, I get on a bus and I can be in downtown San Francisco in 20 minutes, literally.
That's unbelievable. That is unbelievable. What a great thing to be able to say that you're so close, but you're.
Well, you're in LA, so you've got some beautiful, great stuff going down there.
Oh,
I've been there. I've never lived there. How do you compare the living from the Bay Area to LA?
Well, it's beautiful. It's beautiful. I mean, I live a block from the beach, and I see the most beautiful ocean. I try to see it every day, and I do mostly, and it's like a resort. So it's like vacation. It's almost vacation-like here, where I just moved a little while ago. But I've been living in Marina del Rey for a long time, and so it's beautiful, and there's a lot of great culture, a lot of things to take advantage of here. It is a landscape that is a desert. It has the feeling, even though I'm by the ocean, which is great, this little area here, but it's a desert, and it has the feeling that you're trying to connect with other people in a desert. And no matter what you do, no matter how many trees you bring in from other places, and it is a desert-like area. It has that emotional feeling to it. So anyway, community-wise, it's not the same as San Francisco. I lived in North Beach for 12 years, so I went to the same cafe every day, and I saw the same people. And I just recently went up there, and the same people were there. So it's just different. I used to get my phone calls at Cafe Trieste. It's a different kind of.
Do you remember going up on stage at the Holy City Zoo? We used to hang together at a cafe.
The Toy Boat.
We both used to sit there at what was it called? The Blue Danube.
Oh, the Blue Danube. Yeah, that was a great cafe. Yeah, well, San Francisco. I mean, I remember the Grand Piano on Haight Street. And I remember sitting there all day, and you could sit all day, and that's what I love the Blue Danube. That was on Clement Street, a beautiful cafe.
And as a matter of fact, the people that own the Blue Danube opened a Blue Danube in Alameda, California.
Oh, how fantastic! Perfect. That's the first thing I always look for when I move to a place or I go somewhere is a home base, and that's usually. If it can be a coffee shop or a cafe, that's usually it. And there's one here called the Cow's End, which is a very good, nice cafe. Somebody should do a book about cafes. I'm sure there's lots of books about cafes, but really interview the people, hear their stories, because everybody has these amazing stories if you just talk to people, as you know. But to do a picture book and meld it with stories, it's like, this is my neighborhood place, and you could interview people, and you could interview all people from different walks of life. And
interesting that you say that, because the cafe that the people from the Blue Danube bought was called Javarama, and in Alameda, and it was just that kind of a cafe and it hasn't changed its flavor with the new name Blue Danube. And I'm sure that every town has one where either hipsters or writers, people go just to hang and read and play with the computer and.
Well, it's much more it's different having a blue, not wholly different, but different having a Blue Danube than having a Starbucks. The flavor of walking into a Starbucks is a different flavor. It's a different feeling. It's not that you couldn't have groups that meet up there and your friends and have the same effect of other cafes, but it is a little bit different. Usually the people that work there don't live in the neighborhood. I find that sometimes. And
with Starbucks, it's corporate.
Yeah, and it is different. It's like anybody could come here, but I don't see the same people every day. I don't see, it doesn't have that. It's kind of amazing, even though it's like across the street from another coffee shop. It's not a neighborhood coffee shop. And that's how I feel about LA too. It has that feeling to it. It's not, this is my neighborhood. It's more like, this is a place and it happens to be in my neighborhood. So not to put LA down, because there's so much great stuff here. I mean, even if you only had the Hollywood Bowl and nothing else, that would be enough to keep people here.
Right.
That's pretty amazing.
And we both have to keep in mind that we came from an Eastern upbringing. I came from New York. You were from Boston.
Right.
The change to California. What brought you out here initially?
I don't know if I was 18-ish, I want to say. I just needed to get some geographic distance from my family, and I used to have a joke in my act, and I never quote my act, but because I don't know what my act is, but I used to say if people could get along with their families, there'd be no one living here. That California is just a big refugee camp for people who are at war with their pasts. And I felt like, it was funny, but certainly for me, it was just about becoming my own person and getting some distance. And I couldn't go any further. I would have had to go into the ocean, and I'm not an.
Did you have comedy in mind? That's
no. I mean, I didn't come out. I loved comedy, and my mother was very funny, and I grew up, being funny and being able to make people laugh. And starting with my family when I was a little kid. But I have my wife and my daughter are behind me here in the house, and so I don't think they know I don't think they know I'm talking to you, but I am talking to you, so they're headed out. So if you
tell them you're on podcast radio, and
yes, I'm on podcast radio.
Impressed.
That's what it is. Yeah.
But they'll be absolutely impressed. They will come in and they will have flowers for you and champagne, and what a deal! What a deal!
Yeah, you must be. Yeah, you have a vision of life that I really enjoy. That's not what's happening here. But,
yes.
But
it's a fantasy world, but what isn't a fantasy?
Yeah, that's true. This is all a projection.
Can't blame you for asking, right?
Yeah. No. Absolutely. You get what you pay for. But
no,
so that was so that was it. That was it. And I actually, but just before I left, I went to Syracuse University, and then I left there about 2.5 years into it, and I moved back to Boston area, and I worked in the Children's Museum in Boston, and it probably is the best job I ever had, including show business.
Really?
I was in one of the brand new. It was an experiential museum that was really part of the community. It was there for many years, and it was run by Michael Spock, not Mr. Spock. It was run by Dr. Spock's son, and it was a very unusual place. And I was trained in how to plan exhibits and worked with different kinds of kids and different kinds of populations, and it was great. I mean, one of the exhibits that I was working on was called The Factory, and it was an actual factory where kids would make toys, and we would do role reversal with the parents and the kids, or the teachers and the kids, and we'd do some theater games and all kinds of things, and they'd go home with something that they made, and then the way that we got the materials was we took a truck and we went through the factories of South Boston and Boston, and we would pick up material that they were going to throw out, whether it was cardboard or recycled materials. And the guy made a whole world out of this, and it was fascinating. So, there was another exhibit that was just bubbles. There was another one that was about people with disabilities called What If You Couldn't? And I was taking a group through there one day, and a blind person came in, and the kids started asking questions, and they had a whole world that they never would have known. And this was, this place was very, very unique. So anyway, that was a great experience, and that was just before I came out here. And then I trained as an environmental education teacher in New Hampshire, a town called Peterborough, New Hampshire. And Peterborough was the town that Thornton Wilder wrote Our Town about. So it was this little town.
Play, absolutely.
And
Our Town.
Yeah. My favorite.
With that New England accent. In Our Town.
Yeah. Rova's Corners. Yeah.
Yes.
Great for anything. Yeah. Anyway, so that's when I was younger and I came out here, and I didn't really know. I knew one guy from college in L.A., and so I came to stay with him and sleep on his couch. And the day I was coming up the coast of Oregon, Washington, California. I had a backpack and I had a long beard like Aqualung. I looked exactly like the guy from Aqualung. And so I came down the goodbye, guys. Good luck. I came down the Hollywood Boulevard at like 8:30 in the morning, and the first voice I heard here was, "Excuse me, man, do you know what time it is?" And it was Wolfman Jack. And
really?
I said, "It's 8:30, Wolfman." And then I kept walking. And later that day, I went to see my friend whose cousin was a guy who, like everybody in L.A., everybody's related to somebody. His cousin was a composer named Morton Stevens, and he wrote the theme for Hawaii Five-0 and Wild Wild West, the TV shows, right? And
wow.
So
now, may I ask, there were two Hawaii shows. Hawaii Five-0 was the recent one. There was one before that.
There was Hawaiian Eye.
Hawaiian Eye, and my mother's cousin, Stanley Niss, produced that show and created Crickets, or whatever her name was. I think it was Connie Stevens discovered her.
Yeah. Right. In fact, there was a guy who lived in my neighborhood. This older guy, sorry. And I used to talk to him and found out that he was an actor, and his first gig was on Hawaiian Eye. They saw him as a bartender at like Ciro's, and they asked him if he wanted to be on television. And these are the days when
that's way to be
he would literally go up to people and ask them if they wanted to be on a show. So, and he had great stories. But yeah, Hawaiian Eye, that was the precursor to Hawaii Five-0 and a show in the 60s, I think I want to
showed
say.
the beautiful scenery of Hawaii, just as the show with Malden and did
Streets of San Francisco.
The Streets of San Francisco.
Yeah. It was
made television. It made community television. Made the country known to different parts of the country. You know what I'm saying? If you were living in Boston, you had no idea what the scenery was like in California before.
Sure. Growing up, it wasn't like it is now, where because of the web and because of what you have, technology, everybody knows everything. I mean, you might have a certainly limited view. You might not have traveled there, but you can go there. You can see what it is.
Right.
You can't experience it. Much like it's different to have the quality of life is different when you converse with somebody as opposed to go on Facebook. You're talking about the quality. Is it a high quality or a lower quality? And it's a connection on the web, but it's not a high quality connection to me.
It's not face to face. You can't look someone in the eye and see their expression. And you can't hear the tone of their voice, their enthusiasm, whether they're being sarcastic, whether they're being for real. There's a difference. It's limiting, and you can't hug. You could fall in love, but you can't hug somebody. And God knows that.
Yeah, that's a little bit different. It's a little bit different. It's a tool. It's not. It's a good look. If I'm in another country and I want to connect with somebody, that's great. I can go on Skype. I can see them if I wanted to do Skype, and that's great. That's a great technology.
Right.
That doesn't replace conversations. It doesn't replace, actually being able to be in somebody's presence, whoever that person is. And it's the same with like letter writing. People used to write letters, and they were really interesting. The letters, the kind of writing it was very different than the text, texting and posting.
Well, do you remember the old pen pal days? Did you have?
Sure. Sure.
You'd have pen pals, and they'd be from all over. And when I do Facebook, with some of my friends, and we're going back and forth, I realize this is much like pen pal.
Sure. Yeah, it is. It's a short form, and it can be. I'm not saying that people don't have amazing connections or Facebook friends that they're close to, or even on the other side of the world. It could be great, but just the idea of you're sitting and writing and you don't have instant gratification. You don't have. I think that I spoke with a guy. I interviewed a guy named Frank Portnoy, who is a sociologist. And he wrote a book called Wait, the Art and Science of Managing Delay. And he talked about how social media we're becoming more animal and less human because it's instant gratification and it's giving into the instant brain. And we become more animal when we do that. We become less successful, more animal, and less diverse. And so it's interesting. It's a good tool.
Yeah.
I had to, I'm sorry, I keep talking. I had to research a story with Steve Jobs. I was writing something, and I had to look at his early interviews. And it was absolutely fascinating. I saw an interview that he did with CBS in the 70s where he literally comes on the news and he says, this is something called the personal computer. It is not in homes yet, but it will change the world. It will happen, quickly. It'll change the world. It'll be in everyone's home, and it will be very seductive is what he said. He didn't say it'll change the world. He didn't say it will help the world. He didn't say it will be the greatest classroom in the world. He said it will be very seductive. And that was pretty interesting to me because, look at the impact that he made. And I'll tell you, I talk about this a lot, but I really believe it. If I wanted to really change the quality of living in the world and make people less aware and less connected to each other, what I would do is I would create a device that they could hold in the palm of their hand that they actually believed that the place to get information, the place to get knowledge, the place to get entertainment was in the palm of their hand. And that would disassociate them from each other. And then, as a politician or a business person, I could market things to them in that small box, and they would stop looking at the world around them. And that would change the quality of living on the planet. And that is what, that's what has happened, in my opinion.
He predicted that back then.
Yeah, people don't believe that they can change anything. They don't believe that they have any power. And the reason why they don't have any power is they're not connected to each other. so they do feel powerless, and they don't realize that the answer is each other.
Right.
And
if you really want to change things, you can change it through children by communicating with them, by guiding them, and brings to mind my most satisfying experience is being being Philip's dad. Pretty cute, just molding.
Yeah, and how did you experience that? I mean, how did you were single?
I was single. Diane and I met doing comedy, and she was going for her PhD in her second major. She had had a master's in Russian history, and she was trying to get a PhD in accounting because she loved teaching, but she wanted to make some money in teaching. And sadly enough, the academia pays business professors more than other majors, other things she could have been teaching. But she did get her PhD, and we got together with the idea that she wanted a child and a career, and didn't want strangers to raise a child. And I wanted to be a dad, and I was kind of a ne'er-do-well, struggling comedian, no work ethic other than whatsoever. And I knew that I was in my early 40s, and I knew that I would never have an opportunity to be a dad, and other than this, really, other than the opportunity I was given. And we made it work for a while. We were, at least until he was old enough not to need, so by the time he got into the fifth grade, we raised him separately. We were together. I bought a series of camper vans so I could live in the Bay Area and not have to pay exorbitant rents, and be close to him. And we would go away on little excursions, and we'd go up to Santa Rosa, to the Y, and we just spend a lot of time together as father and son, and we got to do that, and it was, and I got to experience a role reversal, and got to see how women are treated in society a little bit more, because I was doing a traditional woman's job. So I'd get to hang with women in the park and, other breeders. We would chat, and I'd get to experience parenthood in a different way than most dads do. Most dads are the working bees, and they come home, and they rarely get to interact with their kids. That's how it was a lot when I grew up. Parents were doing different things. Kids weren't the central part of life. Making a living was. There was no fallback. It was post-war. A lot different. Now, speaking of that,
really interesting. Have you ever written about that, or writing about it?
I know this is
a camper.
I haven't written about it, but I have a project going, and hard to get into right now, but I only have you for a small time, and I have a poignant question for you.
Okay.
What was your grandfather like? Because I've had your cousin, Jerry Crasnick, the sports writer, on these airwaves.
Oh, really?
And
that's great.
Yeah, he's a very fascinating guy, and obviously very well schooled, much like yourself. And
he's
so
a great
I
guy.
I want to know what your commonality is, and in terms of, you do have a lot. I mean, I hear it in your voice. I hear it in your social conscious. What was your grandfather like?
Well, my grandfather, the two grandfathers, the one that would be on Jerry's side, on the Crasnick side, they all come from Maine. They come from not from Maine originally, but from Russia. But they're all Russian Jews. But they came.
Right. Aren't we all?
Yeah, I guess.
The whole world is Russian.
In some ways, yeah. Well, yeah,
right.
I guess that I didn't know him as well as my maternal grandfather, but he came from Russia, and they opened a bakery in Portland, Maine. And there's all this family in Portland, Maine, and many of them are still there. They live within blocks of each other. They love Maine. They're proud of Maine. They walk to each other's houses. And
nice.
It's beautiful. It's beautiful.
Yeah.
So when you go to a cemetery in Maine, you see a lot of Crasnick names, which is it's kind of a Jacob Marley, it's a Jewish Jacob Marley sort of feeling. You go in and you see all these names that are your name, and but here, to answer your question, he was a cold guy. He wasn't very warm, and he wasn't, he was busy working. And I remember going to visit him. My parents, after they moved from Maine, they went to Roxbury in Dorchester, Massachusetts. And we went to visit them, and the air was so heavy in that room. You could cut it with a knife. It was heavy, still air for a kid, and very quiet in these apartments. And you would just sit there and wonder when the hell you were going to get out of there. They wouldn't talk a lot. He was very cold, and sort of a distant guy. And but his wife, I have dreams about her. I've never met her, but supposedly she was an amazing light, like a wonderful person, and very gregarious, very outgoing. The opposite of him. Unfortunately, she died of a heart attack when she was in her 40s, her late 40s, and I never met her. But she was my maternal grandmother. Her name was Sarah Ledder, Ledder, and she was supposedly the life of the family. And my father was a very interesting guy. My father was very close to his mom, loved his mom, well, not close to his dad, my grandfather. And when he was overseas during World War II, she passed away, and nobody told him. Nobody mentioned it. So he came home from the war to find out that his mother had passed away. Never went to a funeral, never heard it. So this was a crazy family, part of it was. The thing is now, the family that's there, they're just really cool people who, they don't have the typical Jewish drama. There's drama in every family, but not like my family. We were, we had mental illness. We had all kinds of crap going on.
Oh, yeah.
But not those people. Those people, those people, yeah, every family has their story, but these people actually like each other and actually relate to each other and have family gatherings and things like that. They don't have that Jewish kind of heaviness, and not to put down Jewish heaviness. It's a great thing, but it's normal.
Anything post-war has to be wrought with heaviness. I mean, Exodus and all of that, the Holocaust, that's carried on. Our family is, Jews have carried that grief on, that oivei. Let me tell you a funny joke about that, okay? This was from an album that I listened to when I was a little kid. You don't have to be Jewish.
Oh.
I don't know if...
When you're in love, the whole world is Jewish?
Something like that. Well, there was one little clip on there that I loved because it really describes... People ask me, what's it like having a Jewish head? What goes on in your head? Okay? Grandpa starts out and he goes, "Oy, Am I thirsty? I'm so thirsty. I'm very thirsty. Here, Grandpa, here's a glass of water. Chugs it down. Oi, was I thirsty? Was I thirsty?
Yeah. Yep, that is
so.
Yeah.
Does that capture it?
Yeah, absolutely. That's well said. Yeah, it's well, you talk about that. The greatest thing about is the tradition and the history and the culture, and there's nothing about staying in the present and living life as it is. It's what happened before and bringing it with you. And so that's,
right.
But the Kabbalah is different. The Kabbalah is all about the spirit and the fire and the philosophy. And, of course, you don't get to read that until you're 40. They don't want you to read that because they say you won't understand it. What I don't understand is how you cannot be present in your life because that's where everything is.
Right, in the moment.
But, yeah. It's just, it's just a real easier way to go. It's the two trains from Stardust Memories. That's what it is. On one train, people are laughing and drinking champagne, and they all look healthy and happy. And on the other train, everybody looks like an Eastern European immigrant with a coat, and they're about to pass away. And so, it's your choice. Where do you want to go? And certainly, we all have that. Doesn't matter if you're Jewish or not, but why can't we let it be easy? Because it's not hard, but we can certainly make choices that make it hard. I mean, it's just not that hard to be present. It's confoundingly simple, and it makes me crazy. That's how it is. Anyway, I'm going to have to go, but I really enjoyed
I thought this was terrific. I really love getting an insight to you. And I still have memories of you and I sitting going over our little notes at the cafe at the Blue Daniel.
Yeah.
And, before you go, I got to ask you for a Holy City Zoo story. Do you have any? Do you remember your first time up? Do you remember?
Yeah. My first time up was, like a lot of people, is getting to be able to get on stage when there's an audience there. And I couldn't do it because at the end of a long night, there was never an audience. They would leave, and
they put the new comics up at the end of the night.
At the end, yeah. And it was typically 1 o'clock in the morning, 2 o'clock in the morning, and so, and I would hang out there, and I was friends with everybody, and I just really wanted to be a comedian, and I wanted to try out my material. I wanted to do stuff, and so Lank and Earl, a comedy team that were great.
Yes.
They made, and Frank Prinzi was another guy, and I can't remember who else it was. It was a small group of people.
Remember Cantu was there for a while?
Yes, this was post Cantu. This was Bob Fisher. Okay. And
right.
They made him sit down and watch me, and it was a group of about 5 comedians sitting in the benches of the Holy City Zoo. And I went up, and it was about 1:30 in the morning on a Tuesday, and they told Bob that I was funny and to watch me, and he did. And I did, some material, and I did some off-the-cuff stuff, and he passed me. And he said, okay, you can come and perform here anytime you want, and, we'll get you on. And shortly thereafter, I was, doing open mics and then weekends and hosting shows and whatever. But the Holy City Zoo, I do remember next door, the Last Day Saloon, the Rock and Roll Club, and the music was so loud that it was into your set. So you're on stage, you're talking to 20 people or 10 people, and next door we had these revival acts, like you had Eric Burden was there, the guy who sang Patches was there.
There was the guy that sang, there's something about your Lincoln, you better, the Lincoln, the car, boom, boom, boom. I can't. That's very descriptive. I ought to be in radio and stuff.
Yeah, no. But
who sung that song about the Lincoln? The Lincoln car passes you on the freeway. Well, those guys were there too. As a revival act.
Yeah, everybody. Ike Turner, the great Ike Turner, who wound up in jail for beating his wife, Tina Turner, everybody, the greats, all the greats were there, and they were, you'd be starting good evening, everybody, it's good to be here, and you'd hear Patches, you'd hear the lyrics to Patches, and it was literally the guy who sang Patches. So it was, and I do remember. I mean, I have many memories from there, but I remember Stephen Pearl is a comedian.
Right, he's been on my show.
He's the only guy I ever saw get a standing ovation in the Holy City Zoo. It's really hard to make 60 people stand up. It's really hard.
Right.
You have to work really hard. He was so
great. Did you interact with Robin at all? Robin Williams?
Yes. Yeah, conversationally, and I'd bring him up on stage, and that energy there was no energy like that. The whole street would light up, as you remember, and he'd come with a hoodie, with a hooded sweatshirt over his head, and then he'd be there, and there were some nights where he would just, they would go crazy for 5 minutes, but then he had to work as a performer to get them on, to get them behind him. And there were some nights where he had to work really hard to do it. But what I remember about Robin Williams most was conversations with him, and what a good listener he was. He was a great listener. I think it's what made him a great improviser. No, he would listen to you, and he had an interest in people. He would ask you questions and sit and listen to you backstage. And so I remember that. Not so much at the zoo, but later years down here, I met him a bunch of times, and we'd just have conversations. He's the sweetest person in the world. Just great.
Yeah,
great human being.
My real enjoyment over there, the person who gave me great inspiration and joy, was Michael Pritchard.
Oh, yeah.
Michael was, he had a way. He looked at me once. We were waiting for the bus on Geary Street after a set at the zoo, and he looked at me. He says, "Did you have fun doing tonight?" And I go, "Well, it was a set at the zoo, or I didn't have a good set, or I did have it." He says, "Just remember, it's all about fun. Make it fun every day. Whatever you're doing, make it fun. If it ain't fun, it shouldn't be getting done." I think he was the first person to say it like that. And he put things into perspective, because there's a lot of pressure on a young comedian trying to, when I say young, new to the business, trying to, make it. You take a lot of pride in your material. You take it's tough. And saying that, but remember, it's coming from fun. Have fun. And made a difference.
Yeah, that's right. Enjoy yourself while you're living. That would be a good thing. He's a fascinating guy. What an interesting guy. Some of the work that he's done with different communities. I'm gonna have to run off here, unfortunately, but we'll do it. We can do it. We'll do it again. We'll talk baseball next time.
Oh, I'd love that. You have to be a Red Sox fan. I'm sure of that.
I'm enormous. I watch every single game.
Then you know that I've started this Comfortably Zoned radio network.
Oops, hello?
It's got... Yes.
Hello.
Are you still with me? Hello?
Oops, I lost you. Now.
No, you got me now.
Anyway, you
I just started to say most of the shows
on
my... Okay, we're fading in and out. I'm just going to catch you next time. I'm going to end the show the way I do every episode, every show. I'm going to implore you, Ed Crasnick, to keep your dreams wet and keep your humor dry. Keep your children out of military recruiting offices and off the laps of clerics that wear dresses. And life will be much better for everybody, for yourself, people around you. Ed, thank you. I know you'll be hearing this. You'll be hearing this end when I send you a link to the post, which will be coming up in a few days.
And
Have a great one.
You said that you would put some music in there, Ralph, and I'm hoping.
I will. I'm going to edit good stuff. There will be. What do you prefer?
I like. I like jazz. I like New Orleans jazz, but I also like Big Bad Voodoo Daddy.
Big Bad Voodoo Daddy. I'm writing that down, and I'm going to learn about Big Bad Voodoo Daddy. And we will mix that in.
Great.
And you know who you're going to be on a show with, who I recorded? Do you remember Maria Falzone?
Very much so, yeah.
Well, I did an interview with her last week, and when I put the two interviews together, we're going to have an episode. She's a wonderful person. And
oh, yeah, I remember her. I haven't talked to her in years. It'll be great to hear her, too. And thanks for having me on. And
I start to say before I thought you were cut off, next time we will talk baseball.
Oh, yeah, it's a whole baseball episode. It's going to be all baseball.
Absolutely. I do. This podcast of mine has turned into a little network. It's called Comfortably Zoned Radio Network. And I have about 7 shows a week. All of them, except my show, which is sometimes baseball, mostly baseball, sometimes just talking, is baseball. I have Peter Golenbach does a show with me every week, the author, and I'd love to have you guest on shows and talk about the Red Sox and your experiences as a fan. Yeah. That would be great. I didn't remember if you were, I know Jerry obviously is a sports fan, didn't know if you were either. And
enormous.
That's pretty
sports
cool.
fan. But a Boston fan.
So I'm going to keep in touch and you do the same. And I'll send you the link when this is published, and it should be, the show goes, let's see, next Thursday. This will be published next Thursday. I'll send you a link and have you back soon. Thank you, Ed. This was
nice to talk to you.
Cool
Keep having fun in Alameda.
And you in L.A.
Right, will do.
Little trivia. We'll save it for next time. Thanks, Ed.
Take care.
Adios,
Bye.
everybody. Catch you then.